A billionaire walks into a small-town diner, never expecting that his past would come rushing back to him. But when a poor waitress sees her mother's picture in his wallet, everything changes. Her mother, a woman struggling with illness, once saved this man's life with a simple act of kindness. Now, decades later, he finally has the chance to repay the debt that shaped his entire future. How one small gesture set off a chain reaction of life-changing events will leave you speechless. If you love these types of stories, don't forget to comment down below where you're watching from. You can support us by liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. The small bell above the door jingled as another customer entered Millie's diner, signaling another order for Emma to take. She let out a quiet sigh, rolling her sore shoulders before slipping her pen behind her ear and smoothing down her apron. It had been a long day, but she couldn't afford to slow down, not when the bills were piling up at home, not when her mother's medical treatments were becoming more expensive by the week. Emma had worked at Millie's for as long as she could remember. Ever since high school, when her mother fell sick, she had taken on as many shifts as possible to keep their heads above water. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. The smell of fresh coffee, the hum of conversations, and the occasional sizzle from the kitchen had become the backdrop of her life. She quickly grabbed her notepad and approached the newest customer, a man who had settled into a corner booth. Something about him stood out immediately. He wasn't like the regulars who came in after a long day at the factory, nor did he resemble the truck drivers who made pit stops along the highway. This man had an air of quiet authority. His navy blue suit was pressed perfectly, his watch gleamed under the warm diner lights, and his neatly combed silver-streaked hair suggested wealth, success, and a life far removed from the humble surroundings of Millie's. Yet, despite his obvious affluence, he seemed strangely out of place. Not uncomfortable, but as if he was lost in thought, as if something had drawn him here. Emma approached his table with the same polite smile she had mastered over the years. "Good evening, sir. What can I get you?" The man looked up, his blue eyes locking onto hers. For a brief second, something flickered in his gaze, an emotion Emma couldn't quite decipher. Surprise? Recognition? No, that was impossible. She didn't know this man. "Just a coffee, please." Black. His voice was deep, steady, but there was something beneath the surface. A certain hesitation. Emma nodded and jotted the order down, though she didn't need to. She had memorized it the moment he spoke. "Coming right up," she said before turning to head toward the coffee station. As she poured the dark liquid into a ceramic mug, she found herself glancing back at him. He had pulled out a worn leather wallet and was holding it in his hands, staring at something inside. His expression had shifted. It was no longer composed but softened, almost nostalgic. Curiosity sparked in Emma, but she quickly shook it off. She wasn't the type to pry into customers' lives. Her job was simple: serve the food, smile, collect tips, and go home. That was it. But as she approached his table again, setting the steaming cup of coffee down in front of him, her eyes caught something that made her breath hitch. A photograph. Tucked inside his wallet was an old, faded picture. But it wasn't just any picture. It was her mother. Emma blinked, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The photograph was unmistakable. Her mother's warm brown eyes, the familiar dimples that appeared whenever she smiled, the soft curls framing her face. It was an image she had seen countless times in their family albums, but how on earth did this stranger have it? She stared at the picture for what felt like an eternity before her voice finally found its way out, quiet and uncertain. "Sir, why is my mother's picture in your wallet?" The moment the words left her lips, the man's fingers tensed around the wallet. His eyes shot up, meeting hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. The air between them was thick, charged with something unspoken. Then, slowly he exhaled, his grip loosening. He looked at the photograph again before carefully tucking it back into his wallet. His hands folded over it as if protecting something sacred. "What's her name?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. Emma hesitated. "Linda Thompson." The name seemed to hit him like a wave, and for the first time, his composed exterior cracked. His shoulders sagged slightly, his jaw clenched, and something in his expression shifted, something deeply personal, almost painful. He repeated the name under his breath, as if trying to convince himself that it was real. That this moment was real. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. Her mother had never mentioned knowing anyone like this. Certainly not a man who looked like he had stepped out of a Forbes magazine cover. Who was he? And why did he look like the name Linda Thompson carried the weight of an entire lifetime? Finally, he looked back at her, his eyes softer now, filled with something between sorrow and gratitude. She saved my life once. Emma felt her knees go weak. What? The man swallowed hard, as if the memory had been buried deep for years and was only now resurfacing. It was a long time ago. Your mother, she wouldn't have told you. But she changed the course of my life. Emma could barely breathe. Her mother was kind, selfless. Of course she was. But this? This was something else entirely. I don't understand, she stammered. What do you mean she saved your life? The man glanced down at his coffee, as if searching for the right words. He let out a slow breath before looking back at her, his voice heavy with the weight of the past. I owe her everything, he said simply. Emma's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table, her world shifting in ways she never could have imagined. And as she stood there, staring at the stranger who somehow held a piece of her mother's past, she knew her life was about to change forever. Emma's fingers gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the man across from her. The hum of the diner, the clinking of plates, the murmur of conversation, the sizzling from the kitchen, faded into the background. The man, who had introduced himself as Richard Carter, held her gaze with an expression that was hard to read. There was sadness there, a quiet reverence, and something else. Something deeper. You said my mother saved your life, Emma finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. But how? She never told me anything about you. Richard sighed, his hands tightening around his coffee cup. He seemed to be gathering his thoughts, traveling back in time to a memory that still lingered fresh in his mind. It was 30 years ago, he began, his voice low. I was a different man back then. Or rather, I wasn't much of a man at all. Just a lost kid with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Emma's brows furrowed. She had never heard of a Richard Carter in her mother's life before. But she stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. I had just dropped out of college, he admitted, his fingers absently tracing the rim of his cup. I was young, reckless, and convinced the world had given up on me. My father had passed away when I was 16, and my mother, well, she was struggling in ways I didn't understand at the time. I thought I could make it on my own, but I was wrong. Dead wrong. Emma remained still, listening intently. I remember the night so clearly, he said, his blue eyes distant. I was in a small town, not far from here. I had spent my last few dollars on a bus ticket, thinking I'd find a way to make something of myself. But by the time I arrived, I was broke, hungry, and had nowhere to go. I ended up at a park bench, sitting there in the freezing cold, wondering if I had made the worst mistake of my life. He paused for a moment, as if the weight of that night still lingered in his bones. And then she came. Emma inhaled sharply. Your mother. Richard's voice softened. I didn't know who she was at the time, just a stranger walking by. But she noticed me. She saw a kid who looked like he had given up. And instead of walking past like everyone else, she stopped. Emma's chest tightened. That sounded exactly like her mother. She sat down next to me, Richard continued. She asked me if I was all right. I don't know why, but the way she spoke, it felt like she actually cared. Not just small talk. Not just pity. She truly wanted to know if I was okay. He let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. I was stubborn. I told her I was fine. That I didn't need help. But she didn't believe me. She asked if I had eaten. When I didn't answer, she just stood up and walked away. I thought that was the end of it. Emma leaned in slightly, hanging on to every word. But 10 minutes later, Richard continued, she came back. With a sandwich and a cup of hot coffee. He exhaled, a mixture of amusement and disbelief in his tone. I remember staring at her like she was crazy. Why would a stranger spend her own money on me? Emma's throat tightened. That was exactly the kind of person her mother was. She didn't just hand it to me and walk away, Richard said, shaking his head. She sat down again. She told me that everyone has bad days. That sometimes, life doesn't go the way we expect. But that didn't mean I was a failure. That didn't mean I was worthless. Emma swallowed hard. She told me something I'll never forget, Richard murmured. The world will try to tell you that you don't matter. But you do. And one day you'll see why. Tears pricked the corners of Emma's eyes. That night, she gave me more than just food, Richard continued. She gave me hope. She gave me a reason to keep going. He smiled faintly, but there was deep emotion behind it. Before she left, she reached into her purse and handed me a $20 bill. She told me to use it to get a bus ticket home, to find my way back. She told me that the people who love me were waiting for me, even if I didn't realize it yet. Emma could barely breathe. Richard leaned back, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. That $20, it was the first act of kindness I had experienced in a long time. And it changed everything. Emma blinked rapidly, trying to process the weight of what he was saying. I took that bus, Richard said. I went back home. I re-enrolled in school. I worked odd jobs to pay for classes. And eventually, I built the company I have today. He exhaled, shaking his head. Your mother's kindness set off a chain reaction. And I never got the chance to thank her. Emma wiped at her eyes, her voice shaking. She never told me any of this. Richard smiled gently. She wouldn't. That's the kind of woman she was, wasn't she? Emma nodded, unable to speak. Richard reached into his wallet again, pulling out the old photograph. I kept this picture with me all these years, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I didn't know her name. I didn't know where she was from. But I never forgot her face. I kept this with me to remind myself that no act of kindness is too small. That one moment can change a life. Emma stared at the photograph, her mother's warm eyes staring back at her. A lump formed in her throat. Richard looked up at her, his expression soft but determined. And now, after all these years, I finally found her. Or rather, I found you. Emma let out a shaky breath. I want to help her, Richard said firmly. I want to repay the kindness she showed me. Whatever she needs, medical bills, treatments, anything, it's taken care of. Emma gasped, shaking her head. Sir, I can't accept that. Richard's expression was gentle but unwavering. You're not accepting it for yourself, Emma. This is for your mother. She gave me everything when she had nothing. This is the least I can do. Emma felt her chest tighten, torn between overwhelming gratitude and disbelief. Richard's voice softened. Please, let me do this. Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. She had spent years fighting alone, struggling to keep her mother afloat. And now, standing before her, was a man whose life had been changed by the very woman who raised her. She swallowed hard, nodding slowly. Richard smiled. Then let's start making things right. And in that moment, Emma realized, one act of kindness had come full circle. Emma's mind reeled as she processed Richard Carter's words. She saved my life once. Her mother? The same woman who had spent years working tirelessly to raise her? The same woman who had put Emma's needs before her own every single time? Of course, Linda Thompson was kind. Emma had always known that. But she had never imagined her mother had impacted a complete stranger so profoundly, let alone a billionaire. Richard took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes distant, lost in memories. Then he sighed, setting the cup down. It was nearly 30 years ago, he began, his voice quieter now, as if he was stepping back into the past. I was barely 20, a college dropout with no money, no home, no direction. I had lost everything. My parents had kicked me out after I failed out of school, and I had no one to turn to. Emma swallowed hard, the image of this powerful man as a struggling, lost young man feeling almost unreal. She had grown up thinking people like him, wealthy, successful businessmen, had always had it easy. But as he spoke, she realized that hadn't been the case at all. I remember that night so clearly, Richard continued. It was late. I was sitting on a park bench, freezing, starving. I had nothing but a tattered backpack and a few coins in my pocket, nowhere to go, nothing to eat. I had never felt so hopeless in my life. He paused, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of his coffee mug. And then, she appeared. Emma's breath caught in her throat. My mother? Richard nodded, a small, wistful smile tugging at the corners of his lips. She couldn't have been much older than me. Maybe mid-20s. She was walking home from a late shift. She told me later that she had just finished working a double at some diner. Emma's chest tightened. That sounds like Mom. I must have looked like a wreck, Richard admitted, shaking his head. But instead of avoiding me like most people did, she stopped. She sat beside me on that cold bench and asked if I was okay. Emma could almost hear her mother's voice in her head, gentle, caring, never judging. I told her the truth, Richard continued, that I wasn't okay, that I had messed up my life, that I had nothing left. His voice faltered slightly before he cleared his throat and went on. And do you know what she did? Emma shook her head slowly, her eyes locked onto his. She smiled, Richard said, his own lips curving just slightly at the memory. She told me that life had a way of turning around when you least expect it, that no matter how bad things seemed, they wouldn't stay that way forever. Then, without hesitation, she reached into her purse, pulled out the last few dollars she had, and handed them to me. She told me to get a warm meal and a bus ticket home. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. That sounds exactly like something Mom would do. I tried to refuse, Richard admitted. I told her I didn't deserve her kindness. But she wouldn't take no for an answer. He let out a breath, shaking his head. That small act, it changed everything for me. It was the first kindness anyone had shown me in a long time. And it made me believe, just for a moment, that maybe I wasn't as lost as I thought. Emma's hands gripped the edge of the table as she listened, her heart aching. She had always known her mother was selfless, but she had never imagined just how far that kindness had reached. Richard met her gaze again, his expression serious. That night, I took her advice. I used that money to buy food and a bus ticket back home. And from there, I rebuilt my life. Emma blinked. But how? How did you go from that to? She gestured around them, the expensive watch on his wrist, the fine suit, the aura of success. Richard smiled slightly. I went back to school. Worked my way through college. Eventually, I got a job in finance, started investing and, well, one thing led to another. Years later, I started my own company. But through it all, I kept that picture of your mother in my wallet. He patted the worn leather as if it was something precious. Because she was my reminder. My proof that a single act of kindness can change the course of someone's life. Emma wiped at her eyes before the tears could fall. She never told me, she whispered. Not once. Richard nodded. She wouldn't have. People like your mother, they don't do good things for recognition. They just do them because it's who they are. Emma took a shaky breath. She's sick, she said finally. She's been struggling for a long time. Richard's expression darkened. What's wrong? Her heart, Emma admitted. The medical bills, they're overwhelming. She let out a bitter laugh. That's why I work so much. Just trying to keep up. For a long moment, Richard said nothing. Then he sat forward, his gaze locked onto hers with quiet determination. Then let me help. Emma's eyes widened. What? Richard's voice was firm, unwavering. Your mother saved my life. I owe her everything. Let me return the favor. Emma shook her head. I can't accept that. Richard leaned in slightly. Emma, this isn't charity. This is something I need to do. Your mother changed my life. Now it's my turn. Emma looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity. And for the first time in a long, long time, she felt something she had nearly forgotten. Emma's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the booth, trying to make sense of everything she had just heard. Richard Carter, the billionaire, the man who had unknowingly sat in her section tonight, had just told her that her mother had once saved his life. Her mother, Linda Thompson, the woman who had spent her entire life giving, sacrificing, and putting others first. The woman who was now lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life, unaware that a man she had helped decades ago was sitting right here, talking about how she had changed his world. Emma swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't understand. My mother never talked about anything like this. Why didn't she ever tell me? Richard gave her a small, knowing smile. Because that's the kind of person she is. She didn't help people to be remembered, Emma. She helped them because it was the right thing to do. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. That sounded exactly like her mother. Linda had always been that way, quiet in her generosity, never expecting anything in return. Richard leaned forward slightly, his expression growing more serious. Tell me, Emma, how is she? How is your mother doing now? Emma hesitated. She had spent so long trying to stay strong, to keep pushing forward despite the weight of their struggles. But something about the way Richard asked, genuine, full of concern, made the walls around her start to crumble. She's sick, Emma admitted, her voice thick with emotion. Really sick. The medical bills keep piling up. I've been working as many shifts as I can to cover them, but, she trailed off, shaking her head. It's never enough. Richard's face darkened, his jaw tightening. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a sleek, black leather checkbook. Emma's eyes widened as he flipped it open and clicked his pen. What are you doing? She asked, her heart pounding. Richard didn't look up as he wrote. I'm taking care of it. Emma's stomach twisted. No, you don't have to do that. He finally met her gaze, his expression unwavering. Emma, your mother saved my life. I've carried her picture with me every single day as a reminder of what kindness can do. And now that I finally have the chance to repay that kindness, you expect me to walk away. He shook his head. No, I won't let her suffer when I can do something about it. Emma felt tears well up in her eyes. She had spent so long feeling like she was carrying this burden alone. The idea that someone, anyone, would step in to help was almost too much to process. Richard finished writing and tore the check from his book, sliding it across the table. Emma hesitated before glancing down at the number. Her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a small gesture. This wasn't just a little help. It was everything. Enough to cover her mother's medical expenses, her treatments, the bills, everything. Her hands shook as she pushed the check back toward him. I can't take this. Richard's expression remained steady. Yes, you can. And you will. Emma wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. It's too much. You don't owe us anything. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Emma, if your mother hadn't found me that night, I wouldn't be here. There would be no Richard Carter, billionaire CEO. I would have given up. She saved my life when I had nothing. Now I have everything, and I can finally give something back. Emma sniffled, trying to steady herself. She had spent so long believing they were alone in this fight. But now, maybe they weren't. Richard sat back, watching her carefully. And this isn't just about your mother, Emma. She frowned, confused. What do you mean? What about you? He asked. What do you want? Emma blinked, caught off guard. No one had ever asked her that. Not really. She had always known what she needed to do, work, take care of her mother, pay the bills. But what did she want? After a long pause, she finally admitted, I wanted to be a teacher. Her voice was small, almost embarrassed. But there was never time. Or money. My mom always came first. Richard studied her for a moment before pulling out another piece of paper and scribbling something down. Then that changes today. He slid the paper toward her, and she realized it was a full scholarship. Emma gasped, covering her mouth. Richard, I can't accept this. He chuckled softly. You sound just like your mother. Emma looked down at the papers in front of her, her vision blurry with tears. Her whole life, she had never expected anything. She had only given just like her mother had. But now, for the first time, kindness was coming back to them. And it was all because of one moment, years ago, when Linda Thompson had chosen to help a stranger in need. Richard smiled. Your mother gave me hope when I had none. Let me do the same for you. And for the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor. The warm afternoon sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft streaks of gold across the sterile white walls. Linda Thompson, frail but awake, sat up in her hospital bed, her once vibrant brown eyes filled with emotion as she listened to her daughter. Emma sat beside her, holding her mother's thin, delicate hand. Her voice was steady, though her heart still hadn't quite processed everything that had happened over the last few weeks. "Mom," she whispered, "I met a man, Richard Carter. He says you saved his life." Linda blinked, her forehead creasing in confusion. "Richard Carter?" She repeated the name slowly, testing it on her tongue as if it were a memory she had long since tucked away. Then, suddenly, her face softened with realization, and a small, knowing smile appeared. "Oh my goodness," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Richard." Emma's breath caught. "So, you do remember him?" Linda chuckled weakly, shaking her head in disbelief. "I didn't think I'd ever hear that name again." She exhaled slowly, her eyes glistening with emotion. "It was so long ago. He was just a boy back then, lost, broken. I saw something in him, something worth saving. I didn't do much, just offered a meal, some kindness." Emma squeezed her mother's hand. "You changed his life, Mom." Linda shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, sweetheart. I just gave him what he needed at that moment. He's the one who did the hard work. He's the one who became someone." Emma felt tears sting her eyes. "But he never forgot you. He kept your picture in his wallet all these years, Mom. He said he carried it to remind himself of the kindness that saved him." She paused, gathering herself. "And now he's helping us. He paid for all your hospital bills. He's sending me to college. He said he wanted to repay the debt he owed you." Linda's eyes widened, filling with fresh tears. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, shaking her head. "I never expected anything in return. That's not why I helped him." Emma smiled through her tears. "I know. And that's why it mattered so much." Linda reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from Emma's face. Her touch was warm, filled with all the love and wisdom of a mother who had spent her entire life putting others before herself. "Kindness," she said softly, "it's like a stone thrown into a pond. The ripples spread further than we ever realize." Emma nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "You started something, Mo. And now, it's come full circle." A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Emma turned, and her breath caught when she saw Richard standing there. He was holding a bouquet of soft pink roses, his usually composed face filled with something deeper, gratitude, reverence, and maybe even a touch of vulnerability. Linda's lips parted in surprise as she took him in. "Richard," she whispered. He stepped inside slowly, his footsteps hesitant, almost as if he were afraid the moment might slip away. "Miss Linda," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's been a long time." Linda smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "It certainly has." For a moment, there was silence, just the weight of years between them, of a past neither had expected to revisit. Then, Richard stepped closer and gently placed the bouquet on the bedside table. He reached into his wallet and pulled out the old photograph, holding it with careful reverence. "I've carried this with me every day," he admitted. "Through every challenge, every success, every moment of doubt, you were my reminder that kindness exists in the world." He looked at her, his blue eyes sincere. "You saved me, and I never got the chance to say thank you." Linda let out a soft laugh, wiping her tears. "You don't need to thank me, Richard. Just knowing you lived a good life is enough." Richard smiled, but his next words came with quiet conviction. "Then let me do what you once did for me. Let me help." He turned to Emma. "Let me help both of you." Linda opened her mouth to protest, but Richard gently cut her off. "Please. This isn't charity. This is gratitude. This is what you taught me, to lift others the way I was lifted." Tears streamed down Linda's face as she nodded, finally accepting the kindness she had once so freely given. Over the next few months, their lives changed in ways Emma could hardly believe. With Richard's help, Linda received the best medical care available, regaining her strength bit by bit. Emma, for the first time in her life, allowed herself to dream. She enrolled in college, working toward becoming a teacher, knowing she would one day be in a position to change lives just as her mother had. And Richard? He became more than just a benefactor. He became family. On Christmas Eve, as they sat together around a small but warm dinner table, Richard raised his glass and smiled. "To Linda," he said, his voice full of emotion, "for proving that kindness never goes unnoticed." Emma looked at her mother, then at Richard, and finally at the life they had rebuilt together. And she knew, without a doubt, that one act of kindness had created ripples far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to check out more of our videos. We have plenty of inspiring and powerful stories waiting for you. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.